We think the contrast between Democrats and Republicans as they are now is so drastic that we have to win.
I love that woman. I just worship her.
Yeah, there you have longtime Democratic operative James Carville creepily declaring his undying love for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi as she defends the strategy of Democrats promoting and uplifting incredibly dangerous Republican candidates in congressional races. And the idea is, well, if we prop up Republican competition that happens to be extreme and insane, well, voters will have no choice but to vote for us wonderful moderate Democrats. What could go wrong? Well, I think we saw back in 2016 what could go wrong with the presidential election. And there's a lot of backlash among the Democratic electorate and even some in the media in regard to what Democrats are doing with this strategy. They say it's risky, they say it's dangerous. But I do want to go to this next clip where we hear more from Carville on why it's not a bad idea at all. It's a great idea.
We've seen efforts by Democratic campaigns and outside groups to tilt the playing field in their favor by propping up extremist Republican candidates in some of these races, some of these very critical races around the country. The idea that it would make it easier for Democrats to win. But on the flip side, if the vote doesn't go their way, you could end up with conspiracy theorists, election deniers, and so on, in some pretty important places.
The idea of a political campaign is to win the election. It acts in its own interest. And let's take Pennsylvania. It clearly was in Josh Shapiro's interest that the Republicans nominate Doug Mastriano. I've done the same thing. I would do the same thing. I don't see any ethical or moral problem with doing this. And again, I think most of the opposition to this is from the pontifical class, mostly located on the coast. I don't see anything wrong with this. And you try to do everything you can to help your candidate or your party win an election. And that's pretty simple. And that's what the DCCC is trying to do. Now, sometimes it backfires. Sometimes it doesn't work. Well, okay, people do stupid things from time to time. But I wholeheartedly endorse this idea of being involved in their primaries to help them nominate the stupidest, goofiest, extreme person they can.
So Farron, I don't understand what he's saying here because on one hand, he's like, this is smart, I would do it. There's no ethical problem with it whatsoever. Sometimes it doesn't work out because sometimes people do stupid. So is it stupid or is it smart? Is it only smart when it works? What was that?
I do. I love. It's like, hey, this is a great idea. Maybe it doesn't work though, and then hey, we're left with the goofiest, nuttiest, whatever it is. First of all, let me just point out something about James Carville. I don't know why we ever listened to him. I don't know how he got put up on this pedestal. Because he helped Bill Clinton win 2 elections in the 90s, where Clinton didn't even get 50% of the popular vote in either of those elections. That's something people forget, right? Bill Clinton won 2 terms because Ross Perot siphoned off enough of the vote to allow Bill Clinton to win. And we treat James Carville and Paul Begala like, oh, well, they did this, they're wonderful. No, had it not been for Ross Perot, nobody would give a crud. Sorry, almost, but anyway, nobody would care one bit who these 2 idiots were. They'd be laughed out of DC. They lucked into this position of being put on a pedestal, and I'm looking at the numbers right here, verifying what I'm saying. Secondly, the success story they point to, a lot of these articles, is Claire McCaskill. Oh, well, look, we elevated Todd Akin, the legitimate rape guy, and Claire McCaskill won that Senate seat. Okay, wonderful. What happened next, right? Where's Claire McCaskill today? Because I think Josh Hawley is sitting in that seat today. So doesn't always work out, even in the examples that they say, look how it worked. It's no. You also gotta look down the road a little bit because it didn't work out for anybody in the end.
Absolutely, and it's interesting because the only thing corporate Democrats, I want to really draw a distinction here. The only thing corporate Democrats run on at this point is vote for us because we're better than the Republican Party. Republican Party's super dangerous. They want to steal elections. They're gonna dismantle our democracy. They're a real threat to the future of this country. Well, it's really, really hard for you to make that argument when you are literally propping up with your own campaign funds the extremist Republican, because that's what you need in order to run your campaign. It's not like they would ever have the audacity to run a campaign based on policy issues that the electorate desperately need and want. You know, progressive policies that fund social spending programs that actually materially improve people's lives. When you take a look at the history of the Democratic Party and why the Democratic Party was successful in previous elections throughout this, nation's history, right? Like especially from the New Deal on. It's because they represented themselves as the party that looks out for ordinary working Americans. Well, now that we have unlimited campaign donations, legalized campaign, bribery essentially by our corporations, well, they've moved further and further away from representing the needs of the working class. Politics has become nothing more than nonstop culture war narratives. And for Democrats, I mean, look, you have Republicans who run on, be afraid of the LGBTQ community. Be afraid, right? They run on abortion issues. They run on all sorts of things, are just completely cloaked in politics. Democratic side, they have their own brand of fear-based politics, and the reason why they focus on it, the reason why they try to scare the electorate about the dangerous nature of the other side, is because their corporate donors don't want them to run campaigns that feature social spending programs that are incredibly popular with the electorate. So everything is just, it shows you what their priorities are, right? It's not about legislating, it's not about governing, it's not about leadership, it's not about doing right by the electorate, your base, by the people who elected you in this position of power in the first place. It's all about me. I want this position of power. I want to be elected into this congressional seat or whatever it is. I want to get reelected into this congressional seat. But I don't want to upset my donors. So I'm going to go ahead and run an entire campaign where the only goal is to be afraid of the bad guy. Okay, we're also picking up the bad guy. So your argument here is follow.
It's interesting too when you're talking about these campaign donations and what has happened to the Democratic Party over the years. Prior to Citizens United being passed, or not passed, sorry, the Supreme Court handing our elections over to corporations. Prior to that, the two top donor groups to the Democratic Party, number one, obviously unions. Number two, trial lawyers. The people that go out there, the people I work for, the people that go out there every single day and fight against these corporations. Those were the two biggest donor groups to the Democratic Party. And that's what the Democratic Party, we were told at least, stood for. Citizens United passes. Who takes over the top? Wall Street banks. That was now, last time I had checked, it's been a couple months, but that was the top donor. Wall Street banks took over for these groups that actually fought for better lives, fought for a cleaner environment, fought for worker safety. All of those groups get pushed to the wayside now because the money from Wall Street is just far greater than anything the unions and the trial lawyers could ever even imagine. And it's so obvious how it has warped this party to where, yeah, it's difficult for them to go out there and run on the issues because they don't even really know where they stand on these issues. So instead, like we're talking about here, what do? They say, okay, let's put the nuttiest, goofiest person you can find and then say, hey, you don't want this guy in office. You need to vote for us instead because look at him. Look at this weirdo. That's not a campaign, but that's what the Democratic Party's doing today. Like, well, at least we're not goofy over here. It's again, ridiculous is the word I always come back to because that's what politics has become.
Absolutely, and we end up suffering the consequences of all of this. I just want to fill in a few blanks in regard to what Carville said in that interview with Jim Acosta, because he specifically mentioned the race between a Republican by the name of Doug Mastriano and a Democrat, Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro helped to prop up this MAGA chud by the name of Doug Mastriano, and this is the, I believe, the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, it's the gubernatorial race. They're running for governor, and here's what we know. Okay, polls show that Republican Doug Mastriano behind Democrat Josh Shapiro only by 3 points, 3 to 4 percentage points, which is within the margin of error. I give you that because Democrat Josh Shapiro got real bold, real cocky, and thought there's no way this MAGA chud is going to win this seat or this gubernatorial race. And fact of the matter is, there's a pretty good chance that he will win this gubernatorial race. And so play stupid games, win stupid prizes, but at the end of the day, the people who really suffer are the individuals who are gonna end up living in that state. And it didn't have to be this way. You could have a Democrat who actually runs on issues that matter, but no, let's prop up the person that we think is extreme because that'll give us a better shot at winning, but it turns out that's not necessarily the case.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.